The trend of spending millions upon millions, potentially into the billions in the AAA space, it's got to be coming to an end. We've got to be looking at a crash sometime soon. The latest news coming out of the AAA corporate mega slot billion-dollar spend is Sony suffering a $765 million loss over Bungie. As we all know, a few years ago, Sony bought Bungie for $3.6 billion, and Bungie's latest escapade into the extraction space, Marathon, is, according to Insider Gaming here, continuing to backslide. Who would have guessed? I don't know what's going on at Sony or who is making the decisions here, but everything they have done in the multiplayer space in the last decade or so has been a complete flop. Destiny 2 was like the last big blow up for Sony, and since then, it just feels like they have no idea where to go in the live service space. And it makes no sense to me. You have Bungie advising Naughty Dog that if they aren't ready to do live service, they should probably can Last of Us Factions, a game that, in my opinion, would have done wonders for Sony's online multiplayer catalog. It probably would have been one of the most successful Sony titles in their multiplayer catalog. I mean, they don't have much, but when you actually take a step back and think about the fact that Bungie, keep in mind, $765 million loss, Bungie is advising anybody on how to run multiplayer live service. Again, $765 million loss. Keep in mind, all of this is going on while there's a change.org petition to Sony to release The Last of Us Factions, The Last of Us Online. I'm not a big petition guy. I've been down this road with Sony in the past, but I will have this link down below if anybody wants to sign it. This news is coming from Insider Gaming. Apparently, Sony's latest earning report isn't painting a pretty picture. Sony acquired Bungie in 2022 for $3.6 billion, and now they're confirming a $765 million impairment loss tied directly to Bungie, which has struggled since launching Marathon just 2 months ago. And what's funny here is Bungie is yet to reveal much in the way of numbers for Marathon, but taking what we know from Steam's public data, it's clear that the player count is wavering past a point of desperation. At the time of writing, Marathon boasting just 6,000 players on Steam. But when we pointed this out prior to launch, we were called negative. We were called haters. We didn't know what we were talking about. We were Arc Raiders fanboys, or whatever fucking label that people wanted to put on it. And now we're here, and Sony's looking at almost an $800 million impairment loss. Are we done yet? And keep in mind, this recent impairment revealed by Sony was backed by a 24% drop in operating income year over year, slipping below analyst expectations. In the numbers, it was confirmed that Bungie had brought about a $765 million impairment loss in the last year, with $565 million of that coming from the last quarter. This means that Bungie's inherent value has dropped a huge amount compared to what it's worth on Sony's books. Who would have thought? The expectation is that Bungie will not be able to recoup those losses simply because the games it's producing or has produced can't stump up the cash. So the real question now is what happens next? Is there going to be layoffs at Bungie? Are they going to need to recoup those losses? How do they turn Marathon around? Do they go back to Destiny and focus on maybe making a new expansion for there? If I can be honest with you guys, I think they're fucked. I really don't think there is a way they can turn Marathon around at this point. It's already dying. The game is cooked. I don't think, like, if they release like a new huge update, I don't think it's going to bring the player base back. Truth of the matter is, the conversation around Marathon had nothing to do with lack of content. It had nothing to do with, oh, we're waiting for update to fix bugs. The game wasn't in a buggy state. It just wasn't that good, and it didn't appeal to a mass demographic. Not that games have to appeal to massive demographics, but Marathon was a very specific case of a game that I think was in a genre that appeals to a broad, demographic, but is such a niche style and art style and lore, and the world around it was so niche and so foreign that I think it just turns a lot of players away. So in order for them to turn this ship around, they would need to compromise on what the artistic vision is for Marathon. And even though I'm not a fan of Marathon, I wouldn't want them to do that. So Marathon, I think, is cooked. Do they shift gears and look back at Destiny 2? The way they have treated the community and the way they have handled Destiny 2's post-launch, they dropped some good expansions. They also dropped some pretty shitty ones. And the last, I think, big one was in 2024. And I think they lost 2/3 of their player base when that thing dropped. I think that community is cooked as well. The truth of the matter is you had so many people asking and clamoring for Destiny 3, and Bungie didn't do it. They wanted to go in a different direction, and that's fine, but now we're here. This isn't the first time that I've seen a Sony-run studio do something like that alienates their fan base. Look at Guerrilla Games. They left the Killzone IP in the dust. People have been asking for that IP for years. They've pivoted towards Horizon, and granted, they have found success with Horizon, which is good. You know, we'll see how long that lasts. But I think a big thing here is having studios that want to work on a project for, 10, 15, 20 years, or working on an IP for that long. They need to do something different. Well, when you do something different, you take a risk. When you pivot, you take risks. And I just think, like, from the jump, Marathon was clearly a risk, and everybody was calling it out from the jump that this game wasn't going to appeal to a broad enough demographic for them to even find a player base. And, like, duh. Fucking duh. And the way that they twist things, even in this financial call, is hilarious. Player reception to Marathon is strong, with the game receiving a Metacritic score of 82 and more than 90% of the player reviews on Steam being positive. Who cares if your multiplayer-only title is dying and players are not logging in? Who gives a shit? If this was a Halo title, you could at least get away with saying that a bunch of people experienced the single-player content and they really like that, and the player numbers aren't really a worry. But when you're talking about multiplayer only, like, who cares? Engagement metrics such as retention also remain at a high level. When you look at the Steam DB, I wouldn't say that. It's obviously dying out. But sure, you might have players that are logging in consistently day over day. That's your 6,000 or whatever. Going forward, we aim to improve the performance of the game by working to retain highly engaged core users through the introduction of additional content, further improvements in the gameplay experience, and expansion of the user base. The 6,000 to 15,000 that are playing the game right now, they want to focus on that. And what else can they really say? Of course. What are you going to say? Fuck those people? Internally, they're probably thinking, man, fuck this shit. Sony expects its current financial year to end up with a flat operating income due to the incorporation of an increase in investments for the next generation platform. It sounds very much like Sony is working hard on PlayStation 6. It sounds very much to me like they needed to say that to justify the downturn in their financials in the last year. I have no doubt that they're working on the PlayStation 6. Guess what? If the PS6 releases and it takes 3 or 4 years to get exclusives for the console, why does it matter? The PS5 in the early onset of this generation struggled to find any sort of reason to actually want the fucking console. And so now we're here. I want to know what you guys think. What does Bungie do in this situation? Do you double down and focus on Marathon? Do you try to pivot and get a team back to create an expansion for Destiny? Do you shift focus and start winding things down and look forward to a Destiny 3? What would you guys do if you're in their situation? You're looking at a $765 million impairment loss. What are you doing if you're Sony and Bungie in this situation? Sound off down below. As always, my name is Big Fry. Leave a like on the video and subscribe for all gaming industry news, especially in the FPS space. And I'll see you on the next one.